groups that I have the privilege of working with and interacting with as a member of the Armed Services Committee and the Strategic Forces Committee here, subcommittee, I truly believe that whatever you're doing to help Center for Security Policy is a vital contribution, because they are one of the leading voices in America and the world, really, for the cause of true human freedom. And I can't express to you how thankful I am just to be able to stand here among all of you and express what I think is just some comments on the dynamics that Iran represents to the world and the peace of the human family. I would suggest to you that Iran's nuclear pursuits are one of the most critically significant and grave threats to the peace of the world that we have anywhere to discuss. I know there are a lot of people that suggest that it's going to be very costly to prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapons capability, and my response to that has consistently been, yes, it will. But it will pale in comparison to the cost in making sure that we can overcome them once they have a nuclear weapons capability. To deal with a nuclear-capable Iran is an unthinkable scenario. Now, quickly, our office was one of the premier committed offices to making sure that we didn't sign a bad deal with Iran on this interim thing. We tried very hard to run ahead of it and to have a resolution in the Congress to make sure that at least Congress was on record. We were not able to effect that, and of course the interim agreement did occur. But keep in mind, there's a couple of things about that interim agreement that I think are very significant. One, in spite of all of the UN resolutions saying that Iran had to build down and take away dismantle their capacity to enrich uranium or to produce plutonium, under the interim agreement, there is a protected protocol to enrich uranium. It's astonishing to me, and especially since, in ultimate terms, ladies and gentlemen, that's the whole ballgame. If Iran can enrich uranium or produce plutonium, they're on their way to becoming a nuclear-armed nation if they choose to be. They don't need any more personnel. They don't need any more technology. They don't need any more materials. All Iran needs to gain a nuclear weapons capability is time. And this administration seems, unfortunately, either naively or just insanely willing to allow them to have that time. And I am extremely concerned about it. It brings me to one of the principal thoughts that I wanted to make today, and that is related to Iran and nuclear EMP. A lot of us understand that once Iran gains a nuclear weapons capability, that they will also have an EMP capability. What people probably don't realize is how much they have focused on it themselves. We just have a little book here that was translated by the National Intelligence University that was essentially the doctrine of Iran on this issue. They pointed out that the grids and infrastructure were critically important targets for EMP in this country, and that EMP represented, in their mind, a very effective advanced mechanism of warfare. If they're that far ahead of us, if they're thinking that far ahead of us, and we are still as vulnerable as we can be, then I think that there's room for a lot of discussion. This is something they're really talking about and thinking about a lot as an offensive capability. And keep in mind, with the missile technology that they have, there is always astonishing. Now I can finally say it. They say as early as 2015, they might have the ability to have a longer range missile capability. Well, the last I checked, 2015 got here. And so this is a much more urgent issue than I think anybody recognizes. And I just have to say to you folks, I think that as concerned as we should all be, that we should have a great deal of hope and just a sense that things are moving in a good direction. Thanks to the enormous help of Center for Security Policy, and I do mean that. Behind the scenes, there have been no group more effective. We were able to see the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act, CIPA, pass in the House last year. And I absolutely believe it will pass again this year, and that it has an excellent chance to pass the Senate. Ultimately, my hope is to see the SHIELD Act passed, because it does really two things. It says that we need a national standard to harden our grid against EMP, and there's nothing we can do, incidentally, more important to deter a potential enemy from using this type of attack against us than hardening our infrastructure. if we do that, then the chances of them having that fatal capability or that enormous impact upon us is so diminished that it no longer makes sense for them strategically to do it. So it's you know, I chair the Missile Defense Caucus in this Congress, and I believe in it more than anyone does. But let me suggest to you that even missile defense is not as important as hardening our grid when it comes to deterring a potential enemy against attacking our grid with the use of EMP. The second thing the SHIELD Act does is it says we want hardware-based solutions to protect our grid. It's notable that our military and our defense apparatus has spent literally billions of dollars in the last many decades to harden our critical defense apparatus against electromagnetic pulse. We never have to argue with the generals, whether it's hardening our missile defense capability or our nuclear triad or other critical defense assets. We never seem to have to argue with them because they understand the reality. Our challenge is to get the civilian grid to understand that they are vulnerable to this in a significant way. The good news is, and once again, Center for Security Policy, I'm not trying to be I'm not a salesman, I don't get a commission here, but I will tell you that the Center for Security Policy is at the forefront of making this issue not only real in the minds of people it needs to be real in, but they are making sure that we're promoting and passing legislation that will make the critical difference. And my hope is that, you know, as I remind everyone, that there's that moment in the life of every problem when it's big enough to be seen. And if Iran's nuclear ambitions are not big enough to be seen now, I don't think they ever will be, and still small enough to be addressed. I think that window is closing. I think this administration, if Iran does gain nuclear weapons capability, will go down in history as the administration that